Taliban lies, White House lies. Which are worse? That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. And before we get started on today's topic, let me just mention that Bold and Blunt is now not just available at Washington Times, at washingtontimes.com, but also at Edify, E-D-I-F-I. Go to Edify online and check out all the faith-based podcasts that are offered for your listening pleasure there, including Bold and Blunt. And take them with you. Download the app, and so you can listen to not just Bold and Blunt, but all the other great faith-based podcasts offered at Edify. And don't forget, you can always subscribe to the Washington Times digital platform and get all the great content the Washington Times has to offer, commentary, news, all the great podcasts we now do, delivered right to your email box. You could do that by subscribing to my personal newsletter. Just go to washingtontimes.com and click on my hyperlinked name. Scroll to the bottom of the commentaries, and there is a easy link to sign up for my 3 times a week newsletter, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, with all my commentaries in it, along with my twice weekly Bold and Blunt podcasts that come out on Tuesdays and Thursdays, delivered right to your email box. Or you can go to washingtontimes.com/Cheryl, type in some information, and for 50% discount, a 50% off deal, you can subscribe to the digital platform of the Washington Times and get all the great content the Washington Times has to offer, not just mine, but all the writers, all the podcasters, all the news analysis and great content, investigative reports and so forth that all the staff at the Washington Times does. You can have access to the digital platform of that for a full year for 50% off. Go to washingtontimes.com/Cheryl for that special deal. So, on to today's show. Taliban lies in Afghanistan, White House lies in Washington, D.C. Which are worse? Which are more frequent? You know, it's really getting hard to decide because it seems like the lies coming from the mouths of Taliban members are very similar to those deceptions coming from spokespeople from this Joe Biden administration. In other words, what both parties are saying, what both sides are saying is, nothing to see here, go home folks, all's happy and easy now in Afghanistan. Now that the U.S. military is gone from Afghanistan, the Taliban has taken over and has brought about this new peaceful existence. And the rest of us in the world are supposed to believe that all is fine and dandy in Afghanistan. For instance, here is what one Taliban spokesperson, I'm not sure if I have the pronunciation right, but Suhail Shaheen, he is the Taliban spokesman in Qatar, and he spoke with NPR's Steve Inskeep just a few weeks ago about the Taliban's commitment to safety for all the people in Afghanistan. And NPR posted this interview just a few weeks ago, so you can read the full interview yourself by doing a quick Google search. But let me just read this one portion. So NPR asked, should people be afraid of reprisals from the Taliban? People who are stuck in Afghanistan, people like U.S. citizens and allies of the United States, you know, the ones who worked hand in hand with U.S. military over there to help U.S. military instill calm and peace and keep Taliban brutality and savagery from taking over in the country. What about those people? Should they be afraid now that the U.S. military is gone, completely gone? Should they be afraid from revenge from the Taliban? And here's the answer. No, there is not any kind of reprisal nor any revenge under those people who are working with the foreign troops meaning U.S. And so we have announced a general amnesty. They can lead their normal life, and they also contribute to the reconstruction of the country, to people's economic prosperity, to their own prosperity. And they can use their talents, capacities in the service of the country and people. Doesn't that sound very democratic? It sounds very, very democratic, very freedom loving, very free principle, advancing, and so forth. And here's another question from NPR, follow-up. We are hearing reports from Kabul of people being searched for, of Taliban fighters going door to door searching for individuals. Are you saying that such activity is not authorized by your leadership? The answer: yeah, not authorized at all. Because if such a person are seen, they will be detained because it is against the announced statement, official statement of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. And more, our security forces are coming in order to maintain order and to prevent any such incidents taking place in the city. Isn't that great? More peaceful resolution, more peaceful takeover of Afghanistan. Here's another question. Here's another question from NPR. There are news reports describing people who would be unable to complain because they have been killed. Isn't this interesting? They would complain about the takeover of the Taliban, but curiously, they've been murdered. What's up with that, Taliban? And here's the answer. Here's the answer from the peaceful Taliban spokesperson from Qatar. Some of these videos you mentioned, and I didn't read the whole question from NPR, but NPR spoke of videos that actually showed some of these killed people. And here's the Taliban official's answer. Some of these videos you mentioned, they are fake videos. They're fake. Again, nothing to see here. Go home, folks. Okay, so NPR, to its credit, pushes back a little bit and follows up with this. I would not say it's impossible that a video is faked, but these stories arrived to us amid some well-documented history of the Taliban when they were last in charge of Afghanistan. For instance, NPR goes on to say, when the Taliban took over in 1996, there was a former president who was dragged out of a diplomatic compound and left hanging from a light pole. Well, that doesn't sound very peaceful, Mr. Taliban spokesperson. What's up with that? And then NPR also says there were public executions of civilians at a soccer field, a football field in Kandahar. Good Lord, is this really peaceful, Mr. Taliban? And then NPR goes on to say, this is Steve speaking, right from NPR, about his personal first-person witness account. I stood on that football field afterward and talked with people who had seen those executions. I do not doubt that they happened. Is your group any different today than it was then? And here's the answer. Here's the answer from Mr. Peaceful Taliban official. Today we have announced a general amnesty. You may have seen our statements not once, 2 or 3 times. We announced that they not in one language. So it is our commitment. And also we announced that we will provide protection for the smooth functioning of the embassies and diplomats. And then he goes on, yada, 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 blah, 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 blah. So basically, nothing to see here. Don't be silly. We certainly aren't going to hang people in the public square from light poles. No, we've learned our lesson from that. We're much more peaceful now. Now we're going to hang them behind the football field where people won't gather and the media won't have access. So our hangings going forward will be done in private. And that, in effect, is how the Taliban has been operating, because it's public perception right now that they're worried about. Let me play you this clip from Channel 4 News in late September, just a couple weeks ago.
The Taliban have had media training. So, instead of stonings in the stadium, on Wednesday, a mullah met some monkeys at Kabul Zoo.
Right. They go to meet the monkeys in the zoo and bring the cameras with them, so they look like just everyday normal citizens loving the monkeys, loving the visits to the zoo. I wouldn't be surprised if they carried some snacks and candy and little toys to distribute to the children. Wouldn't be surprised if they stopped at the ice cream stand and purchased a few ice cream cones wearing their Joe Biden t-shirts and so forth. Let's go back to Channel 4 News again. We want to show everyone that under Islamic rule and security, okay, he's speaking in his language, and I'm just reading you the subtitles, reading you what this Taliban commander is saying to Channel 4 News. We want to show everyone that under Islamic rule and security, everything is enjoyable and everyone can live in their own country the way they want.
The message the Taliban want to send the international community. It's time to acknowledge the new administration because, look, normalcy is returning.
Nothing to see here. Go home, folks. The Taliban's in charge, and the Taliban is not the Taliban of 20 years ago. They're not the same people. They've seen the error of their ways. They've seen the error of their brutal executions in the public square ways. They've seen the error of their hang people from flagpoles and light poles and let the bodies dangle as examples to the rest in the country ways. And they've turned, and now they're all about the peace. They're all about the patting the monkeys on the head, and they're all about the just strolling through the streets, and they're not looking to enforce Islamic law. They're not looking to enforce any kind of strict Sharia rules and regulations and principles. They're only strolling through the streets to make sure that everybody is happy and, as this Taliban commander put it, enjoying life. It's a new world in Afghanistan, and under this current Taliban regime, in cooperation, in partnership, practically with the White House and Joe Biden's feckless presidency, everything is enjoyable and life is good. Except there's that whole issue with women who are suddenly thrown back in the home, and if they are in fact allowed on the street, have to wear coverings head to toe and be accompanied by a male escort, else face floggings or beatings or death. Well, we don't know because the Taliban takes them out behind the soccer field now instead of right in the soccer field where everybody can see. Back to Channel 4 News.
Women breadwinners who can't go to work, just one part of an economy in freefall. This week, the World Food Programme warned that food insecurity was starting to affect everyone in Afghan society, not just in the drought-stricken rural areas.
9 out of 10 people don't have enough to eat. And 50% of the population has experienced running out of food at least once in the last 2 weeks.
That was the chief economist from the World Food Programme. 9 out of 10 people in Afghanistan don't have enough to eat right now. Women who were normally breadwinners, women who weren't married and were out there in the workforce trying to work and bring money home to raise and feed their children, suddenly told they can't work anymore. What are they supposed to do? Join the ranks of the other 9 out of 10 Afghanistan people who cannot eat, who don't have food. But it's peaceful. It's peaceful. There's nothing to see here, folks. Go home. So, look, it's a disaster. And my guest today has some inside expert analysis of what's going on in Afghanistan right now that, curiously enough, in many cases counters the White House narrative and certainly counters the Taliban narrative of nothing to see here. It's all peaceful and joyful and enjoyable lifetimes right now in Afghanistan. His name is Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan P. Myers, retired U.S. Marine Corps, served with distinction for 28 years as an intelligence officer. He was highly decorated. He participated in many, many high-profile national security events. And he has written the book, American to the Core, Iraq, Bosnia, Benghazi, Snowden, a Marine Corps intelligence officer's incredible journey. And he's here today to discuss Afghanistan as well as other national security issues pertinent to today's America as well as yesterday's America. So, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Myers, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
So your background is in intelligence. Could you just briefly describe your background and your military experience and your family background in intelligence?
Sure. So my family has a long history in intelligence. Both of my parents were CIA agents, and my uncle was a very senior intelligence professional for the U.S. Navy as a civilian as well as in the NSA. And then I served 28 years as a Marine Corps intelligence officer starting in 1991 up until just last year, where I was serving as one of General Milley's intelligence officers on the Joint Staff.
Okay, and you have since written this book. It's called American to the Core, or as Barack Obama might pronounce it, Corpse. American to the Core, Iraq, Bosnia, Benghazi, Snowden, a Marine Corps intelligence officer's incredible journey. What is your journey? What is the incredible journey that you describe?
Well, I had quite an interesting career. I was fortunate enough to participate in a number of high-profile missions. I started as a second lieutenant working at the tactical level, but throughout my career I was able to participate in the rescue of Scott O'Grady from Bosnia. I was the officer in charge of the response to the Benghazi attacks in terms of reinforcing the embassy and planning to reinforce Benghazi. And then I also led the Snowden investigation for the Marine Corps before ending up on the Joint Staff, where I was the Director of Regional Intelligence Support.
Okay, and what exactly did you find out about Snowden that people are unaware of right now?
Well, the big lesson I learned is that he's a pretty common crook. He gets painted a lot in the media as some sort of Robin Hood type figure, savior, exposing the deep, dark government secrets. But if you know the whole history of the man, he actually was just kind of a habitual liar, all the way from when he was in the Army, lying about why he was couldn't continue in the Army, lying about degrees, lying about job qualifications, and then ultimately lying about stealing classified secrets. He's more of a common criminal, really, than a savior, anybody's savior.
So the big question with Snowden that was always tossed around was that, is he a hero to America, or is he, as you just described? And a lot of people still to this day think he did a very good service to American citizens by showing some of the inner workings of, I guess what we can call the deep state of the spy community, and the privacy invasions that some Americans have suffered. So how do you characterize that, or how do you respond to that?
Well, a lot of in the public realm, it's the story is that he did that to expose the NSA collection programs, and that he was, after he heard General Clapper give testimony, he was so angered that he started stealing these so he could expose them to the American public. But the fact of the matter is he started stealing them like 4 months before the general ever gave his testimony. In addition to the fact that that percentage of the theft was minuscule compared to the damage he did across the intelligence spectrum, as well as to all the services. I mean, the stuff that he stole from the Marine Corps alone was far more extensive than the minuscule amount of data he stole regarding NSA eavesdropping.
Did he do real damage to America's national security, or was it more embarrassing to some of America's highest ranking?
He did a lot of damage, and that's one of the things I get into in my book that people just don't understand. Like, I led the team of Marines that did the analysis on what he stole from the Marine Corps and how much it damaged us. And we didn't just have to determine what he stole, we had to determine how to mitigate the damage, and it was extensive. And we're the smallest service, and we don't even have the technologies and the weapon systems that a lot of the other services have. And it was pretty damaging. We had to go back, find people who had been out of the Marine Corps for years and years, and tell them that they personally had been compromised. I mean, it revealed the names of a lot of operatives and a lot of at the time we had ongoing combat operations, and it jeopardized a lot of those as well.
Were there any lives lost? Did it get that deep because of some of the names that he exposed?
I actually can't answer that question because I don't know. There were ongoing operations in Iraq and Afghanistan that were compromised because of his theft, and some of the people involved in those had to be reassigned.
Okay.
So obviously it went far beyond what you read in the media. And we're only the Marine Corps, the smallest. I mean, we would see some stuff, we would come across stuff that he stole from the Navy and the Air Force and the Army that was just mind-blowing. And of course we would coordinate with them to ensure they knew about it, but it was significant.
So your finding, your conclusion is that Edward Snowden was definitely a traitor, not a hero.
Absolutely. He was a traitor. Anytime the media gets involved, there's all sorts of different slants that get put on it. But if you sat down like my team did and studied the guy's whole history, as well as the history of the theft and how it played out, there was nothing admirable about it whatsoever. He just got lucky that he stole a bunch of stuff that was valuable to the public in the public realm. But aside from that, it was just common treason, really.
Okay, let's pivot to modern day Afghanistan because that's definitely in the news right now. And you also mentioned that you worked with General Milley. So can you kind of summarize watching this from your position, which you're in Berlin right now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm in Germany. Yes, that's correct.
So watching this, not just from overseas, the overseas perspective, and probably hearing from overseas people what they think of America right now, but also in your own personal perspective through your intelligence eyes and years of experience, what is your response to Afghanistan, how it was handled, and also the fire that General Milley is facing right now?
Well, it was totally shocking and surprising and upsetting to me as it was anybody else, more so because I'm a veteran, and to just see us up and leave like that, not only as bad as Vietnam but worse because we abandoned so many American citizens, was just absolutely shocking and appalling to me. And it's one of the reasons that I started working to get people out with my team of 2 former Marines. We've been working alongside Pineapple Express and other groups, but it was shocking to me. I left the Joint Staff a year ago, and I had no indication whatsoever that Milley would turn out to be a decision maker that he has turned out to be. Just shocking.
So if you had been in charge, or if you had been in a position of advising Joe Biden, President Biden, what would you have said about Afghanistan?
I would have said that irrespective of the ultimate goal, whether it's to keep a force presence in Afghanistan or to withdraw completely, and under absolutely no circumstances should we be in a position where we're going to leave American citizens and other trusted allies that desperately want to escape behind enemy lines and unable to escape, and their lives in jeopardy. That would have been the number one priority, and we absolutely would not have taken one boot off the ground until those people were safe.
And that's common sense, and yet here we are. So going forward, geez, it's going to be a mess in Afghanistan. Is there any way to put the light back on in that tribal nation now that the dark has sort of settled back in?
Well, I wish I was more positive and upbeat about it, but I'm not. I mean, the Taliban is the Taliban. They haven't changed.
Right.
They didn't fight for 20 years and lose 100,000 fighters or more because they wanted to come to Kabul and, change their ways. They put all that effort into it because they want the same thing they had before being pushed out in 2001. And the situation there is going to degrade. There's going to be civil war. And, of course, all the terror groups that we pushed out into Africa and other areas are going to consolidate there and use it as a training area. So we're actually worse off today than we were on September 10th, 2001 in regards to Afghanistan. It's just on pause. It might take a year or a couple of years, but it's going to get worse.
And especially with the equipment, the military equipment that we left/gave to the Taliban now.
Yes, well, anytime we go in to train a force, I used to do the same sort of work across Africa, and anytime we go in to train a force, our intent is to make them one of the best trained and best equipped, if it's possible to do that, forces in the region. And we left the Afghan National Army as one of the best equipped forces in the entire region. And by default, the Taliban has become one of the best equipped forces in the entire region, which is just unbelievable to me. and they'll have full access to all that equipment, with the exception of some of the stuff that we damaged.
And what's a little bit even more unbelieving is that this administration, this White House administration, seems to think that they can take a diplomatic stance with the Taliban, and gosh knows who else is going to go in there to work with the Taliban. They still seem to think that diplomacy is going to bring about some semblance of freedom.
It certainly won't bring it about internally. The Taliban is going to rule Afghanistan with an iron fist, and it's going to be brutal, and they've already demonstrated this. And, I have information about some of the people we've been trying to evacuate that have already been subjected to atrocities, their families, that people we're trying to evacuate are on the run and in hiding as we try to get them out, hopefully successfully. So any sort of diplomatic efforts, the Taliban's going to put on a different face publicly in the international realm than they are domestically at home. And at home, it's going to be just really terrible.
And the White House is going to help them put on that happy face, because it's because of this administration that they're able to commit these atrocities right now anyhow. And, the Democrats cannot take responsibility for this with an election coming. That's the bleak but true assessment, yes?
I would agree with the assessment that the U.S. government has definitely left the Taliban in position to do basically whatever they want and to just run across that country as they see fit. And it was the direct result of a political decision that didn't need to happen. It was a very simple decision whether to keep troops on the ground until we got all the Americans out and the allies that were identified by other Americans, or to just yank them out in the middle of the night. And that was a purely political decision by the current people in power, and it resulted in what we're looking at today.
So what are you hearing anecdotally, not just for the official word in Germany from business or military officials, but what are you hearing from the people on the streets, the people in the coffee shops, just average Jane and Joes over in Germany about America's actions in Afghanistan?
Well, when it first happened, it's cooled down since then. But when it first happened, it was just all the media, the European media in Germany and the UK were just flabbergasted that such a decision was made. And a lot of the people I talked to over here definitely felt as if the United States left them in a lurch, and they were confused as to why, and they were in disbelief. And honestly, I was right there with them. I felt exactly the same as they did, believe it or not.
So you said you personally, along with a couple of your colleagues, went to rescue people in Afghanistan. Can you kind of describe how you went about doing that? I assume you didn't just fly over there and land and escort people onto a helicopter.
No, so none of these efforts have been with anybody actually in Afghanistan. There are a few groups who have sent some people to some bordering countries to try to facilitate people once they get out. But there have been no boots on the ground. So our effort has been, from our homes. I'm in Europe. My other teammate, Katie Garraway, is in Maryland, and my other teammate, Rico Reyes, is in Texas, Austin, Texas. And it just so happened early on, when the forces were still there, we were very well connected with the Marines at CENTCOM, as well as in Kabul, who were conducting the mission. So we were able to feed them directly the names of people they needed to find, because we were getting them from the informal network of Marines around the world. So we had a lot of success those first 2 weeks. Just everybody we wanted to get out, we got out. And then, of course, when the troops left, we ran into the same difficulties that everybody else has heard about, not being able to get people over the wall, having buses stranded outside. And now it's been, several weeks of trying to keep people safe, keep them fed, and get them out by alternative means. And we do all of that by coordinating with people who are donating funds and people on the ground, but not Americans. We're dealing with Afghans on the ground.
I think of the women over there and, the young girls who were born these last few years into comparative freedom, and suddenly that's gone up in smoke. Where do you see the fate of women, girls right now, women's rights, women's freedoms in the coming months, years even?
Well, it's not good. And as you said, I mean, if you think about it, it's really unbelievable that any woman in Afghanistan under the age of, about 25, 26, has absolutely no recollection of ever living under the Taliban or under Sharia law. And now, almost in an instant, they're all subject to Sharia law, and they've been yanked out of school. They can no longer walk outside without male escorts. They can no longer walk uncovered. The early days, there were some protests, and those, of course, were beaten down by the Taliban. So the situation for female rights and female liberties in Afghanistan is probably the worst that you could have it in the world right now.
Oh, wow. That's bleak. So let me just finish with this one question. Is there anything that American citizens can do right now in America to reach out and help bring some sort of relief to those that have been betrayed by Americans right now in Afghanistan?
Well, the veterans groups are still making an effort to get people out. And one important thing I like to point out, because I now see the media narrative sort of changing, even on both sides, conservative and Republican, towards criticizing the vetting process and how many Afghans got in that were not vetted. But it's important to note that my group and the Pineapple Group and the other veterans groups, we are only trying to bring people that were identified to us by other Americans. American citizens we work on, SIV, green card holders, as well as allies whose names were given to us by people who served in Afghanistan. So the first day with the C-17 and the flood of people that were unvetted, that's over. All the people we're trying to bring now are vetted in some manner or another. And so it's important to support those veterans groups and to continue the public pressure on the decision makers. Don't let them forget about this, and don't let them get away with it.
Aside from the Pineapple Group, which I assume people can look up online, yes?
Yes, people can look up the Pineapple Group online, and I do believe they're accepting donations as well. And it does cost money to keep these people safe, keep them fed, and to transport them out of the country.
Okay, that's where I was leading donations. So aside from the Pineapple Group, are there other specific veterans groups that you would like to point out that people can actually go online and make donations to right now for the Afghan issue?
Well, if people just Google Pineapple Express Veterans Group as well as Digital Dunkirk Veterans Group, you can find ways to donate to those organizations. My group, we're separate from Pineapple Express, but we work with them every day, all day long, and it's just 3 Marines, and so we're sort of doing a private effort.
Okay, and as for your book, American to the Core, Iraq, Bosnia, Benghazi, Snowden, a Marine Corps intelligence officer's incredible journey. Jonathan Myers, I know you can get it on Amazon. Where else can you get it?
You can get it anywhere that you can buy a book online.
Sounds great. That makes it easy. Look, I want to thank you so much for your service to the country and for your service in this book at revealing the truth that people need to know about. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being on Bold and Blunt. And another Bold and Blunt podcast. That's a wrap. Look, I think we're going to be talking about Afghanistan for a very long time because under this administration, first off, there aren't going to come any acknowledgments of responsibility. And second off, there are just going to be more and more red flags that come out, more and more finger pointing that goes on, and it's going to leave the American people, even Democrats, it's even going to leave Democrats this way. It's going to leave more and more American people upset at the treatment of American citizens and innocents and allies in Afghanistan from this White House administration. So this isn't going away anytime soon. Thanks for listening. Don't forget, go to edifi.com and check out all the faith-based podcasts there. Edify yourself. Fill yourself with faith-based motivation to get through this Joe Biden White House administration. We need it. Thank you for listening, and in the meanwhile, stay blunt, stay bold.